Hello, hello. Good afternoon. It's a new day. Um, we are starting off today at chapter 5. Yesterday we finished chapter 4, which we met Dante's brother Luca, and we found out a little bit about what's going on with him and the blackmail that Francis, Vivian's father, has on Dante. So Luca's been messing around with the Mafia Boss's niece, his pride and joy pretty much. And if he found out, then it would definitely be no more for his brother. So that's that. We are going to go back in and light our watermelon mint candle. This was too good yesterday, so we're going to go in and light this candle again for our ambiance today. And we're going to get right into chapter 5. I did make the correction from the first video that I did. This is King of Wrath, and the author's name is actually Anna Wong. I totally butchered her last name. So I apologize. But anyway, chapter 5, and we are looking in Vivian's point of view now. So we're back to Vivian. What do you mean you haven't talked to your fiance since your engagement? Isabella crossed her arms and leveled me with a reproving stare. What type of ridiculous relationship is that? An arranged one? The bar tilted before righting itself. Perhaps I shouldn't have had 2.5 Mai Tais in a row. My weekly happy hour with Isabella and Sloane was the one time I can let loose. No judging eyes, no need to be perfect and proper. So what if I was a little tipsy? The bar was called the Tipsy Goat. It was expected. That's funny, it's called the Tipsy Goat. I used to go to the Tipsy Goat all the time when I lived in Illinois. That was my favorite bar too. Anyways, it's better that we hadn't spoke. I added, he's not the most pleasant conversationalist. Even now, the moment of my first and so far only meeting with Dante sent a rush of indignation down my spine. He'd shown no remorse over skipping out on half our introductory dinner to smoke a cigar in my father's office, so he'd left without so much as a thank you or good night. Dante was a billionaire, and he had the manners of an ill-bred troll. Why are you marrying him? Sloane raised a perfectly groomed brow. Tell your parents to find you a better match. That's the problem. There is no better match in their eyes. They think he's perfect. Dante Russo, perfect? Her eyebrows arched higher. His security team once hospitalized someone who tried to break into his house. The guy wound up in months-long coma with broken ribs and a shattered kneecap. It's impressive, but I wouldn't say he's perfect. Only Sloane would think putting a guy in a coma was impressive. Trust me, I know. I'm not the only one you have to convince, I muttered. Not that Dante's notorious ruthlessness matters to my family. He can shoot someone during rush hour in Midtown Manhattan, and they'd say the person deserved it. I don't understand why you agreed to any engagement at all. Sloane shook her head. You don't need your parents' money. You can marry who you want, and there's not a thing that they can do about it. It's not about the money. Even if my parents cut off my inheritance, I had plenty left over from my job, investments, and trust fund, which I came into when I was 21. It's about, I searched for the right word, family. Isabella and Sloane exchanged glances. This wasn't the first time we discussed any engagement or my relationship with my parents, but I felt compelled to defend them each time. Arranged marriages are expected in my family, I said. My sister did it, and so will I. I've known this was coming since I was a teenager. Yeah, but what are they going to do if you say no? Isabella asked. Disown you? My stomach plummeted. I forced a tight laugh. Maybe. Absolutely. They'd lauded my aunt for disowning my cousin after she turned down a scholarship to Princeton to open a food truck. Refusing a marriage Refusing to marry a Russo was 1,000 times worse. If I broke the engagement, my parents would never see or speak to me again. They weren't perfect, but the prospect of getting cut off from my family and being all alone made the Mai Tais slosh dangerously in my stomach. Isabella wouldn't understand, though. Culturally, we were similar, though she was Filipina Chinese instead of Hong Kong Chinese, but she came from a large, loving family who was okay with her moving across the country to bartend and pursue her writing dreams. If I expressed similar desires to my parents, they'd either lock me in my room and perform an exorcism or toss me onto the streets with nothing except the clothes on my back, figuratively speaking. I don't want to disappoint them, I said. They raised me, and they sacrificed a lot, so I can have the life I have now. Marrying Dante would help all of us. Familial relationships shouldn't be transactional, but I couldn't shake the sense I owed my parents a huge debt for everything. The opportunities, the education, the freedom to live and work where I wanted, without worrying about money. They were luxuries most people didn't have, and I didn't take them for granted. Parents took care of their children. When the children grew up, they took care of their parents. In our case, that meant children married well and expanded the family's wealth and influence. It was just the way our world worked. Isabella sighed. We've been friends since we met at a yoga class when we were 21. The yoga lessons hadn't lasted, our friendship had. She knew better than to argue with me about my family. Okay, but that doesn't change the fact that you haven't spoken to him when you're moving in with him next week. I fidgeted with my sapphire bracelet. I would have pushed back on giving up the West Village apartment to move in with Dante's Upper East End penthouse, but what would be the point? I would just be wasting my breath arguing with my father. However, other than Dante's address, I didn't have any details for the move. No keys, no building requirements, nothing. You have to talk to the man eventually, Isabella added. Don't be a huss. I'm not a huss, I turned to Sloane. Am I? Sorry. Wuss. Don't be a wuss. I'm not a wuss, I turned to Sloane. Am I? She glanced up from her phone. Technically, none of us were allowed to check our phones during happy hour. Whoever broke the rule had to pick up the tab for the night. In reality, Sloane had been bankrolling our happy hours for the past 6 months. She put the work in workaholic. Although I disagreed with Isabella's advice, 78% of the time, she's right. You have to talk to him before you move in, an elegant shrug. There's an art exhibition at Dante's house tonight. You should attend. Dante owned a notoriously impressive art collection rumored to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His annual private exhibition showcase, his latest acquisitions, were one of the most coveted invites in Manhattan. We were technically engaged, and my lack of an invitation would have been embarrassing had I not been so relieved. After I moved in, I'd have to spend every night with him, so I was clinging to my freedom while it lasted. The prospect of sharing a bed with Dante Russo was unnerving. An image rose in my mind of him sitting behind my father's desk, eyes dark and posture arrogant, with tendrils of smoke curling around that boldly charismatic face. An unexpected heat ran between my legs, the press of his thumb against my lip, the smoky glint in his eyes when he looked at me. There'd been a moment, just one, when I thought he would kiss me, not to show affection, but to dirty me up, to dominate, to corrupt. The warmth curled low until the heavy expectancy of my friend's gaze pulled me back into the present. I wasn't in my father's office. I was in a bar, and they were waiting for an answer. The exhibition? Right. A cold rush of reality doused the heat. I couldn't show up uninvited, I said, hoping they couldn't see me blush beneath my alcohol-induced redness. It's rude. You're not a random party crasher. You're his fiancé, even if you don't have a ring yet, Isabella countered. Plus, you're moving in soon anyway. Consider it a preview of your new home, which you couldn't move into unless you talked to him. I sighed, wishing I could rewind time by a month so I can mentally prepare myself for what's coming. I hate it when you make sense. Isabella's cheeks dimpled. Most people do. I would go with you, but I love a good party. Because I love a good party crasher, house tour, but I have a shift tonight. By day, she was an aspiring erotic thriller author. By night, she served overpriced drinks to overgrown frat boy types at a dive bar in the East Village. She hated the bar, its clientele, and its creepy manager, and was actively looking for another job, but until she found one, she was stuck. Sloane? I asked hopefully. If I were to confront Dante tonight, I'd need backup. I can't. Asher Donovan crashed his Ferrari in London. He's fine, Sloane said when Isabella and I gasped. Neither of us cared about sports, but the famous soccer star was too pretty to die. But I have to put out our media fire. This is the second car he'd crashed in as many months. Sloane ran a boutique public relations firm with a small but high-powered client roster. She was always putting out fires. She motioned our server for the check, paid the tab, and made me promise to call her if I needed anything before she disappeared out the door in the cloud of Jo Malone perfume and platinum blonde hair. Isabella left soon after for her shift, but I lingered in the booth, debating what to do next. If I were smart, I would go home and finish packing for my move. Nothing good would come of crashing Dante's party, and I can call him tomorrow if I really wanted. Pack, shower, and sleep, I decided. That was my plan, and I was sticking to it. I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're not on the list. It doesn't matter whether you're Mr. Russo's mother, sister, or fiancé. The hostess raised a brow at my bare ring finger. I can't let you in without an invitation. Oh, I guess you decided to sneak away and crash the party. My smile didn't falter. If you call Dante, he'll confirm my identity, I said, even though I wasn't sure he would. I'd deal with that bridge when we got there. This is simply an oversight. I'd gone home as planned after happy hour and lasted a total of 20 minutes before I caved to Isabella and Sloane's suggestion. They were right. I couldn't sit around waiting for Dante when my move-in date loomed so close. I had to suck it up and see him, no matter how much he annoyed or unnerved me. Of course, in order to see him, I had to get into the party. The hostess' face reddened. I assure you, there was no oversight. We are meticulous in... Vivian, there you are. An aristocratic British voice cut smoothly through our standoff. I turned, surprise coasting through me when I saw the handsome Asian man smiling at me. His flawless, chiseled face and deep dark eyes would have almost been too perfect were it not for the simple black frames lending a touch of approachability. Dante just texted. He's looking for you, and you weren't answering your phone. He came up beside me and retrieved an elegant cream invitation from his jacket pocket. He handed it to the hostess. Kai Young, +1. I can bring Miss Allow in so we don't bother Dante on his big night. She glared at me, but offered Dante a tight smile. Of course, Mr. Young. Enjoy the party. She stepped inside, as did the pair of unsmiling, suited guards behind her. Unlike nightclubs or bars, exclusive events like this rarely ask for ID. The staff was expected to memorize and pair the guests' faces with their names on sight. I waited until we were out of earsight before I turned to Kai with a grateful smile. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. Kai and I weren't close friends, but we often attended the same parties and chatted whenever we crossed paths. His thoughtful, reserved demeanor was a breath of fresh air in the narcissistic jungle of Manhattan high society. You're welcome. His formal tone made me smile. Born in Hong Kong, raised in London, educated at Oxford and Cambridge, Kai's mannerisms were a clear reflection of his upbringing. I'm sure your absence on the list was an oversight on Dante's part. He whisked 2 glasses of champagne off the passing server's tray and handed one to me. Speaking of which, congratulations on your engagement, or should I say condolences. My smile bloomed into a laugh. The jury is still out. From what I'd heard, Kai and Dante were friends. I wasn't sure what Dante told him about our engagement, but I was erring on the side of caution. As far as the public was concerned, we were a happy, loving couple who couldn't be more thrilled to be engaged. Smart. Most people treat Dante like we walk on water. Kai's eyes sparkled. He needs someone to remind him he's moral, just like the rest of us. Oh, trust me, I said. I don't think he's a god. More like the devil sent to work on my last nerve. Kai laughed. We made small talk for another few minutes before he excused himself to talk to an old college friend. Why couldn't I end up with someone like him? He was polite, charming, and rich enough to meet my parents' standards. Instead, I was stuck with this brooding Italian who wouldn't know good manners if they slapped him in the face. I sighed and set my empty glass on the nearby tray before I wandered through the penthouse, taking in the gorgeous architecture and decor. Dante had eschewed the modern minimalism so popular with his bachelor brethren, in favor of the handcrafted furniture and rich jewel tones. Turkish and Persian silk rugs covered the gleaming floors, and lush velvet drapes framed floor-to-ceiling windows, boasting panoramic views of Central Park and the city's iconic skyline. I passed 2 sitting rooms, 4 powder rooms, 1 screening room, and 1 gaming lounge before I entered the long, skylit gallery where the actual exhibition took place. I hadn't spotted Dante yet, but he was most likely. My steps slowly when the familiar head of glossy black hair came into view. Dante stood at the other end of the hall, talking to a beautiful redhead and an Asian man with cheekbones sharp enough to cut ice. He smiled at something they said, his expression warm. So he was capable of normal human emotion after all. Good to know. My blood burned a little hotter, either from the alcohol or from the sight of his real smile. I chose to believe it was the former. Dante must have felt the weight of my stare because he stopped talking and looked up. Our eyes locked, and the warmth disappeared from his face like the sun beneath the horizon. My heartbeats crashed against each other. A double-length hallway's worth of space separates us, and his displeasure was so potent it seeped through the air and into my body like a deadly poison. Dante excused himself from his guests and stalked towards me, his powerful, muscled frame slicing through the crowd with the single-minded surety of the predator locked on its prey. Tingles of alarm crusaded down my spine, and I forced myself to hold my ground even as every self-preservation instinct